So let's have a look at some Australian organisations which have their social media policies available publicly on their websites. Firstly, the ABC.
This is the ABC, the national broadcaster, affectionately known as Auntie. It's taken to social media like a duck to water. 4.6 million hits on their website every month. 66 million podcasts already downloaded. 5,000 staff and a massive 500 social media accounts.
The ABC's use of social media policy is quite short and sharp, just 81 lines in total, with the tagline of encouraging staff and contractors to actively engage with social media while being clear who is responsible for personal and professional uses. It sets out a policy statement for both professional and personal use of social media, describes the purpose of the policy, who it applies to, and the consequences of breaching the policy. While the ABC encourages the use of social media and sees it as increasingly part of the work and private lives of ABC staff, it applies these 4 standards to all work and personal use of interactive services. It speaks directly to staff. Firstly, don't mix the professional and the personal in ways likely to bring the ABC into disrepute. Don't undermine your effectiveness at work. Don't imply ABC endorsement of your personal views. And don't disclose confidential information obtained through work. The policy goes on to explain the ABC's responsibility under its considerable editorial policies, which include content posted on official social media accounts. And just as you thought, that's a pretty reasonable and brief policy. It makes sense and there's no real ambiguity. Here comes the kicker. From further down in corporate ABC land comes another set of guidelines, this time 8 pages, entitled Guidelines for Personal Use of Social Media. This document spells out much more comprehensively guidelines for the use of personal accounts and explains how the use of social media intersects with professional lives and gives advice about how staff can manage the risks that may arise. Central to the policy are the 4 standards as shown previously, and a sliding scale to staff for determining their own level of risk. This scale asks staff to consider their broad role in the ABC, as well as their specific job in that role, how senior they are in the staff dynamic, their profile in the public sphere, and the sort of information to which they have access. An interesting note for staff is to be aware that when they do make a comment or share a particular view of something, it is helping others to form a view of themselves, which can suggest a bias and compromise credibility.
And now here's Telstra, Australia's biggest telecommunications and media company. It provides nearly 16 million mobile services across Australia and covers 99% of the country. It has a workforce of 37,000 people.
Telstra's social media presence includes 2 official Twitter accounts, a Facebook page, a YouTube account, and a dedicated social media support channel. Its social media policy centres around the company's 3 R's of social media engagement. Telstra refers to these 3 R's as guardrails. They are representation, responsibility, and respect. Here's a part of the telco's social media engagement video available on their website.
Is one big conversation, so keep the 3 R's in mind when we're online and talking about Telstra. Even outside of work, we represent Telstra. So make sure you're clear about who you are and what you do. It's all about being real and keeping it that way. We have the responsibility to tell it like it is. So if you're telling the world about the great stuff we offer, remember to always tell the truth. Of course, if you ever find yourself in a tricky situation online, remember to act with respect, never fire up, and always avoid those who are.
Telstra staff who wish to represent Telstra in social media must complete an accreditation process and other training, including best social media practice. Under the R for representation, they are under strict instructions to disclose that they are Telstra employees and only discuss publicly available information. Under the responsibility R, they must only offer advice on their own areas of expertise and not post material which is obscene, defamatory, threatening, harassing, discriminatory or hateful. They must also comply with the company's privacy policy and marketing privacy policy. Under the Respect R, they must be respectful of all individuals, their communities and opinions. A different section of the Telstra policy outlines personal use of social media, still using the 3 R's. All employees and contractors must complete mandatory online training of the 3 Rs during their induction. This part of the policy only applies if the employee chooses to make references to Telstra, its people, its products or services, its competitors or other business-related people or companies. Telstra also tells staff they must comply with obligations under the Competition and Consumer Act, as well as copyright, privacy, financial disclosure and other applicable laws. The policy also outlines what happens to staff if they breach the social media policy, and includes at least 5 other company policies which must be taken into consideration when using social media.
And now to Lifeline, advocates for the needy and saviours to those in crisis. They answer more than 1 million calls every year to people who have nowhere else to turn. Lifeline also has 11,000 volunteers who man their storefronts and their counselling lines.
Lifeline engages with social media via Facebook, Twitter and YouTube, mostly to provide messages, service updates and information, and as an avenue for public support from their national office and individual centres around the country. Employees and volunteers are encouraged to use social media, and Lifeline asks them to be guided by the following principles, all prefaced with "I will." They begin, "I will not criticise clients, Lifeline or related government policy. I will respond to others' opinions respectfully and professionally. I will not do anything to breach my employment terms. I will not harass, bully or intimidate. I will acknowledge and correct mistakes promptly and disclose conflicts of interest. I will not post inaccurate information. I will link to online references and original source materials directly. I will be polite, considerate, kind and fair. I will always ensure the activity does no harm, and I will champion Lifeline and its services." The Lifeline policy sets out different definitions for official and personal use of social media. Posting as a representative of Lifeline requires permission from a centre manager or manager of communications, marketing and government relations. Posts from official Lifeline accounts must comply with Lifeline's ethics and guiding principles and can't promote individual staff or volunteer businesses, money-making ventures, political candidates, preferences or parties. The personal use section of the policy stipulates that staff or volunteers or even supporters of Lifeline who don't identify themselves as being affiliated to Lifeline are still counted as representing the organisation, as the nature of the online world means that they could be traced back to the organisation through their online presence. Lifeline's policy also gives advice on how an individual can set up their own account, which may mention their links to Lifeline. They're allowed, providing the account doesn't have the affiliation with Lifeline as the primary identifier, and providing that it stipulates that the opinions expressed are the person's own and not that of Lifeline. And lastly, providing that it gives a disclaimer that reposting, likes, retweeting, etc. do not represent the views of Lifeline. The Lifeline policy also identifies and outlines 14 types of activities which it defines as inappropriate use of social media. They range from conducting a private business on Lifeline's social media presence to using discriminatory, defamatory, abusive or otherwise objectionable language, to accessing sites promoting hatred or direct political affiliation, to using excessive bandwidth or uploading pornography. The policy also explains how policy breaches will be dealt with.